Okay guys, welcome to another video. Again, round 11 for the AFL 2018 season. I'm just going to go through the games and give my thoughts on what I think is going to happen. Alright, so starting off on Friday night, Sydney versus Carlton. Carlton's not going too well at the moment, obviously. It's not exactly breaking news. They're 18th, Sydney sitting pretty at 4th. Pretty heavy favourites, and it would have to be a catastrophic failure worse than Geelong's loss against Essendon a couple of weeks ago. Sydney all the way, easily. Moving on to Saturday's matches, the Western Bulldogs are taking on Melbourne, and the Bulldogs really aren't going too great. Couple of losses in a row, and meanwhile Melbourne's putting probably the best performance all year against the Crows in Alice Springs over the weekend, and man, with that form, they're definitely a kind of a threat to sort of take seriously. Melbourne all the way. The Western Bulldogs, it's 2 weeks in a row where they've only scored in 2 quarters. They played against the Crows a couple of weeks ago, and they got 2 goals the entire game, and they were kept goalless last week against Collingwood. So something's got to fucking happen. You know, Bulldogs are going to get up, but I can't see it happening. Hawthorn versus Port Adelaide. I think this is going to be a really good match. Port are going to be nice and rested from their break. Hawks are coming off a couple of losses in a row. I'm going to slightly edge Hawthorn in this one. Last week they didn't actually look too bad. They were reasonably competitive against Brisbane up until halfway through the third quarter. Then things started to go bad. But you know, I think they're not a bad team, and I do think they could probably get up over Port over the weekend. So Gold Coast are also taking on Geelong up in Metricon. I think the Cats should have that one fairly easily. They've got some fairly interesting injuries. Radicalia's broken leg, of course. Probably like the main one. That was brutal. But I don't think Geelong should have too much problems. I've not really seen too much from Gold Coast that would make me think that they could beat Geelong. That being said, though, Geelong did lose to Essendon a couple of weeks ago, but I think they've learnt those lessons, and I think that should be a fairly comfortable away win for them. Essendon coming up against Richmond. Essendon, 2 wins in a row now. Geelong and oh shit, who'd they be on the weekend? GWS. Sorry. Not horrible teams. Couple of good wins there, and they are looking a lot better than the last couple of rounds before that. But they're coming up against Richmond. I think Richmond should have that fairly easily. It's not that Richmond are playing badly. I just think that they just got probably outplayed a couple of weeks ago against the West Coast, and you know, they're still one of the best teams in the competition. Only an idiot would kind of say they're not. Speaking of West Coast are taking on St Kilda, and I think West Coast are going to absolutely destroy them. I can't really see West Coast losing at home to St Kilda, who have trouble kicking goals. They were probably their best performance last week, over the weekend, but they still fell short. It was just a fairly average sort of performance by St Kilda, and I don't think going over to Western Australia to play West Coast is going to help them overcome that sort of their problems. North up against Brisbane at Etihad, so a nice little home game for North Melbourne. I think they should beat Brisbane pretty easily, you kind of think, but Brisbane don't seem to have a lot of trouble kicking goals. They did last weekend, but there's a couple of games against Hawthorn, I think it was Collingwood, where they still kicked about 19 goals. So North should come into this game with a little bit of caution and just not underestimate the Lions too much. So at the moment, we got Collingwood and the Dockers, and at the MCG, you'd give a slight edge to Collingwood. They are, as much as I hate to say, playing quite well. Which for me sucks. For Collingwood fans, I suppose that's a good thing. But there's just that consistency with the Dockers away from home, which probably makes Collingwood like the better option. So I think Collingwood should have that one fairly easily. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if Collingwood kind of get up and kick, just get up by about 1 or 2 goals. If it's a close game, that's where Collingwood really have to sort of, be wary over the Dockers. And in the last game today that I'm going to be covering is the Adelaide Crows versus GWS. Adelaide Crows got fucking demolished by Melbourne. I don't think the Crows are going to win the premiership at all this year. I think for the last couple of years it's been building and building and building. I think they had their shot against Richmond in the grand final last year and they blew it. So I think probably not going to threaten for another good couple of years. And, with all their injuries and stuff, they're really not playing good football. Even though they won against the Western Bulldogs, it's still a win against the Western Bulldogs. So I think the Crows will win against the Giants. The Giants haven't won it in quite a while now, and a couple of weeks, in about 4 weeks, actually 4 losses in a row. And a couple of weeks before that, they had that draw against St Kilda and a couple of losses around then, and they're not travelling too well, which is a shame because they definitely have the talent to threaten the top 8. I would had them picked for like a top 4, maybe 5th, and it would be interesting if they don't make the finals in September. But I think the Crows will definitely get up because they were just going to cop it in the media all this week till they play. They're going to cop it, from the fans as well. And it's going to be really bad here, especially in Adelaide for them. So thanks very much, guys. I've also changed up some of the other things to make the presentation look a bit nicer. Let me know what your thoughts are. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you next week.